Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. It's your favorite lawyer. So today we'll be talking about one very interesting topic: navigating unforeseen circumstances in contracts. In summary, this topic is referred to as force majeure. Force majeure. Force majeure is a clause, a critical clause that is contained in contract, or that should be contained in your contract, especially in this day and age where there are many limiting factors to one's ability to perform one's contract. Force majeure is a French word in English which means major force. So major force, force majeure, means a force or something that occurs and makes it difficult or nearly impossible to continue with a contract, with a contract obligation. Now, why is this important? The concept force majeure is important in drafting contract because as human beings we are frail and we have a lot of things that could affect one's ability to perform one's contract. Now, it's important to lay this foundation that generally the law does not allow you to make a contract and renege on it. So generally speaking, everyone is bound by the contract he or she has made. That is why you have to be very careful before you sign any document, because you can't just make a contract today and expect to just renege on it for every and any reason. But again, there are limitations because we are human beings. We are not perfect. We are prone as humans to situations that are beyond our control. So the term force majeure comes in to arrest such uncontrollable circumstances. The situation must be unforeseeable, uncontrollable, and unimaginable. So once those situations arises, these are situations that will perfectly lead to a force majeure clause can come into effect. So the key element of a force majeure clause in a contract is that for one, the force majeure clause must be clearly defined. You have to specify and define the issues that will lead to a force majeure clause. And in doing this, the environment of the business is properly considered. That is the nature of the business, even the place of the business, because the factors that can occur say in Nigeria may not be factors that can occur in the US. For instance, in Nigeria we have epileptic power supply. So if power is a very major factor in your business, you can now agree on terms that will lead to force majeure. So those type of things could lead to force majeure. Another key element for the force majeure clause is the notice period. You specify the notice that will be given by the party that is being affected by the major force, by the unforeseen circumstance. Then third key element is you state the obligations of each party in the contract in that kind of situation. So you state the obligations of the parties, particularly the party that is being hindered, and even the other party that is expecting the service or the action. Then the fourth element of a force majeure clause is you have to specify the termination rights and state where the parties' rights will terminate and what will happen in that kind of situation. So these elements are key in a force majeure clause. It's pertinent to state that there are two major aspects of force majeure. So one is generally known as act of God. These are natural situations, natural occurrences like flood, tsunamis, earthquakes. Those are natural occurrences which we in law we refer to them as acts of God. Then there are the ones that are caused by human action. So they are humanly instigated. Force majeure events that are humanly instigated, like strikes, wars, acts of terrorism, conflicts, banditry. Those are humanly caused, even though there are still situations that occur without the control of the parties. Nobody knows when there will be an act of terrorism. Now, why is a force majeure clause important in your contract? It includes risk allocation because it enables the parties to allocate risks properly, so that somebody doesn't get stuck or somebody doesn't just incur liabilities for nothing. The second importance of a force majeure clause in your contract is that it provides for certainty, contractual certainty. In as much as you don't know when these force majeure events can happen, but you just give yourself some kind of certainty as to what will happen to a force majeure event occur. In as much as, yes, the force majeure event is not something that you can predict, it's not something that you can foresee, you can't imagine it, and you cannot even control it, but then we learn from past experiences. So you have seen people in that your business environment, you've seen the kind of hindrances that have happened in the past, so you prepare for yourself going forward now. So you can't say you don't know that this type of thing can happen. So it enables you to plan properly and have some certainty, because one thing that hinders contracts a lot is uncertainties. Nobody wants to run a business with uncertainties, which is why in places that have instability, there's banditry and all that, the rate of business is low, because investors don't want to invest in businesses with uncertainties. From this second point, the third point can be derived. It enables you to plan for eventualities and avoid and reduce losses that would have occurred if you didn't plan for them. The first importance of force majeure clause is that it enables you to plan for your dispute resolution mechanism. So if a force majeure event arises that will hinder the performance of the parties' contractual obligations, then the force majeure clause also will address what can be done when those force majeure events arise. So it helps you to resolve the dispute. For instance, now, if there was no force majeure clause in your contract and a force majeure event happens, there's a strike or there's a pandemic that has hindered a party from fulfilling his contractual obligations, that could now lead to a dispute, because I mean, you didn't plan for a force majeure event, you have no force majeure clause, so you didn't envisage it in your contract. Then to now lead to a dispute as to what can now be done at that point. And the worst time to plan for a dispute in a contract is when the dispute arises. It is always better to plan for your dispute ahead of the dispute, when the parties are still signing the contracts, when all is okay and all is well and everybody has a clear head, not when there's a fault that has arisen and then there's a dispute. That's not the best time to plan for dispute resolution mechanisms. So to successfully invoke a force majeure clause when a force majeure event has arisen, there are factors that have to be in place. One, there must be a valid contract between the parties. So this is as basic as it is. One cannot be relying on a force majeure clause when there is no valid and binding contract between the two parties. Another key factor that must be there before one can invoke a force majeure clause is that the force majeure clause itself must also be in that valid contract. Like I said earlier, you have to deliberately plan to include the force majeure clause in your contract to take care of these situations. The third factor is that the force majeure event must have been unforeseen, must have been unpredictable, and then it should be something that the parties can control. So if that event is something that is within the control of the party, it doesn't qualify as a force majeure event. Now, the fourth factor that must be there before one can invoke a force majeure clause is that the force majeure event must be one that will render the performance of the contract impracticable to everybody that looks at it. To a reasonable man, it's impracticable. For instance, a simple contract for supplies of goods to people that work offshore. Such vendor that has that contract to supply those goods to people offshore should have supplies that will last more than a month, about 2 months. So you can't say because there was a strike and something happened, you have run out of supplies within 1 week, when you know you have this obligation to supply this thing to people offshore, and it's a running contract for a long period of time, for a year or something, or for even years. So you know it's something that you do regularly. So you should have in your stock some supplies that can last for more than a month, about 1 to 2 months, which is reasonable. But if the strike happens and within the next week you cannot even make your supplies, it shows that you didn't plan properly. So these factors are key before one can invoke a force majeure clause. Now, there's another aspect, a legal twist. There's a concept also called frustration of contract. So frustration of contract is similar to force majeure. The major difference only is that a force majeure event doesn't necessarily mean that the party will be absolved completely from performing the obligation. Meanwhile, frustration of contract, as the name implies, means that the contract has been completely frustrated, it cannot be performed anymore. So there's a slight difference there, and it is safe to say that a force majeure event could lead to a frustration of contract. So why they are different, one could lead to the other, because depending on the length of time in which the force majeure event continues, it could eventually lead to frustration of the contract. For instance, the COVID pandemic, which started on a small scale but continued for over a year throughout 2020, we saw how everything was shut down. And because of that long-term period, many contracts were eventually frustrated because time had passed. There was no need in performing those obligations again because it had elapsed by virtue of time. So a force majeure event could eventually lead to frustration of contract depending on the length of time in which the force majeure event continues. In conclusion, it is important to ensure you have a properly drafted force majeure clause in any contract you're embarking on, so as to enable you prepare for the worst and plan for the worst, allocate risk properly, and avoid wastages so as to maximize your profits. So this is where we'll be drawing a curtain with regards to this topic. So I hope you got value from the topic. If you did, kindly comment in the comment section below, like the video, and subscribe to get more updates when more videos are uploaded. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.